So I've been contemplating the last couple days about the digital aspect of Flesh and Blood through Tabletop Simulator and all that aspect of playing Flesh and Blood over the ones and zeros of the internet and trying to think of a really good debate for it. I'm trying to prove the impossible, not prove, man, just to give a really good argument for it and saying, hey, digital game is good. Having flesh and blood in the digital space through tabletop simulator specifically, but also in a realm where you can play it online with people around the world. And I really think it's important for flesh and blood to be that way. And let me just give it out in the beginning, man. I think that the Flesh and Blood trading card game should be a trading card game. I don't want Legend Story Studios to produce an online digital game. I do not want that to be the production, but I definitely feel that there should be some slight support or some like subtle thing that's used, and I'll give examples later on, but I definitely think that a digital realm for Flesh and Blood is really integral. And I know the big thing. So let me get into the debate, the arguments I have. I won't run around the bush here. I'm not gonna go any which way. I'm gonna be straight, man. The straight to the point. The first big roadblock of this whole thing of Flesh and Blood being more digital or digital focused is the main purpose of Flesh and Blood. And you've heard me say it a bunch of times. You've heard everyone say this time. I'm going to read it verbatim so we can go in depth on this. So it says on the Flesh and Blood website, our mission is to bring people together in the flesh and blood through the common language of playing great games. Now, there's a couple key pieces in there, and the first is really want to harp on is bring people together in the flesh and blood. So it's forming a community of people, in person. And at the end, it's saying playing great games. So great games are a common language. That's a key thing. Those things equal. So great games equals it's a common language between people, right? Now that's an important sentence, but there's also another sentence that really delves into that a little bit more, and it's on the Legend Story Studios website, and this is their focus. And why I say this, man, these are their compasses. When you see these things, when you see these statements, these mission statements on Flesh and Blood site and Legend Story Studios site, these are their focus. This is their compass. So on Legend Story Studios site, it reads, and I'm paraphrasing. I think it's the second line in their whole like about section, but it says trading card games are an incredible medium bringing people together as a community. We've heard that from the other one. They are a force so powerful as to transcend barriers of age, race, religion, gender, and even spoken language through a common language of playing great games. So you heard a couple different things that were the same, especially the common language of playing great games. So if playing great games, if games are a great language, right, to transcend barriers. My big argument, straight up, is that when we are playing locally, are we transcending that many barriers as if we were transcending barriers through people around the world? Think about that, man. Because if the common language of the game is meant to transcend barriers, I'm not really transcending any barriers when I'm talking to people locally, like AJ from what is it? Adventure Co Gaming. Like him and I, seems like we're pretty similar. Of course, we have different things that we aren't in common, but we live geographically in the same place in the world in Florida. We probably like the similar things. I've talked to him. We seem very similar as a person. And when I'm talking to him, I don't feel like I'm transcending any barriers. It seems like a cool guy that I could definitely be friends with if we were put in a room together for a prolonged period of time without flesh and blood. So flesh and blood isn't really transcending any barriers there. Is it bringing us together? Yes, it is. It is definitely bringing us together. But would we just be brought together by any other game, possibly. Who knows? And maybe that's other games, but the big thing I want to harp on here, and Flesh and Blood is an amazing game. Very passionate. You guys know this. I'm not dissing in any way here, but transcending barriers through the online digital realms is huge. I've definitely transcended a lot of barriers and talked to a lot of different people around the world that I would have never talked to in my life if it wasn't for this game. And I've loved the experiences that I've had. And I really that's the point of me really thinking deep into this because I definitely think online digital versions of this game, like Tabletop Simulator, it's a great method for bringing people together in the online space. And I know that sounds crazy, but I I I know that doesn't really sound crazy, but I think that it really needs to be more prioritized, and it really needs to be more of a thing in the future. Maybe some white cloud event will do it. I don't know, but the point of the matter is if we're going into these different verbiages here. So Legend Story Studio says that the common language of playing great games and great games transcend. They're a medium to bringing people together. And I do agree with that. I just want to really harp on they transcend different barriers locally. Not going to argue against that. But when it talks about religion and even spoken language is in there. Well, everyone in my local game store speaks English. I'm not really transcending spoken language, and of course, the main counterpoint to this is you might say, Bronson, what about these tournaments? What about these world tournaments or big tournaments that will eventually come? And I feel that big tournaments or any tournaments, there will definitely be times where the game is played and you don't need to speak the same language as your opponent. It's going to be like that and people are going to play like that. And I think that is one of the moments where I mean if James White and the people at Legend Story Studio sees that people are playing each other and they don't even speak the same language and they're playing Flesh and Blood in person, that's going to be such a tear-jerking moment. I'd be like, "Oh my gosh, this is what we wanted." And I know I went on a little deviation there, but man, that does seem like the whole purpose of the game. But when you only have these local things, man, it's not transcending as much as when you're actually playing with people around the world. And with Tabletop Simulator, man, I've played Kale from Dead Summer Art. He's all the way in Australia. And we're in completely different time zones. It's day for him, it's night for me, and him and I are very similar too, like minded. But he's got probably much different types of lifestyle over there. It's probably different than what I'm used to in Florida, and it's cool to interact with people that I would have never talked to in my life. And I talked to Jordan from Cobra Pearl channel, and he's all the way up in Canada. And what's cool is apparently when he was searching around on the internet for Flesh and Blood, my face randomly popped up a couple times because I'm making YouTube videos. But I mean, that's just so cool to see that I have some minor clout in Canada. Shout out to Canada and everywhere else. But man, like it's just when you see the impact that the internet and the digital space has with bringing people together, we are not in the flesh and blood. I have never, hugged these people. We've never touched or anything. I have never seen them in front of my face, but I've used webcam. I've vocally spoken through my mouth hole, and I've seen them on my screen. I've done my drinking with Bronson thing, and I've seen people. So it really does beg the question, man. If it's not really in the flesh and blood, it's not really that much different. I mean, this is just a bunch of meat and skin and blood and guts. It's no big deal. But overall, if I'm talking to someone in the flesh and blood, right? But two scenarios: me through webcam or me through somebody right here. Let's say someone was right here. If someone was right here, I'm just gonna talk to them, and I'm seeing them visually, hearing them through my ears, and the same with webcam. I'm seeing them visually and hearing them through my ears. And if you think about that, if you could develop some sort of thing with TTS where you had to talk, where you had to visually look at someone, or you had to have a screen thing, that's pretty dang close to being in the flesh and blood. And let me just kind of wrap up the whole logic thing in the statements. Now, flesh and blood's big thing is bringing people together in the flesh and blood. That's a trading card game. That's its purpose. And I think that as a compass, like I was saying earlier, these statements are compasses. When Flesh and Blood or Legend Story Studios is presented with these things like Tabletop Simulator, they match it against these compasses to see if they jive. And to that, it doesn't jive. But the thing is, I don't think Flesh and Blood should be converted into a digital game in its entirety. I just think that Tabletop Simulator maybe has more different tweaks to it, and that's not modifying the game at all. That's just doing something on the side that kind of that makes that a thing. And when you look at Legend Story Studios, it says trading card games are incredible medium for bringing people together as a community. They force on powerful that what is it? They are a force so powerful to transcend barriers and all that stuff, right? But here's the key, man. Here's the key. Here's the key focus. Is Legend Story Studios' focus, and their compass doesn't say that they have to be in the flesh and blood. They just say trading card games are an incredible medium, some white cloud type thing up there. So when you have that kind of sentence and verbiage of Legend Story Studios, they're fine with it. They are fine. It's they want to bring people together as a community and help they did say also the local game stores they want to help and all this stuff, but I think that I think that it's really important to focus on some sort of digital thing. And I'll admit, man, so I've played TTS a couple times, and or I've played it a good amount, and there's a couple times though that I have played with chat where I say, and this is gonna be a long video, man. This is gonna be a huge ass rant, so so buckle in. But I've done the TTS thing where I've done the chat and like I do 5 damage, and then the other person's like I block 6, and like okay pass, and that is boring. I totally agree, and I don't think I ever want to do that ever again because it's not it's not like it's not fun. It's just really inefficient. But also after those games, I'm just like, it's kind of boring. I'm not really talking to anyone, and I don't talk too much to my games, but it's a lot easier, and it definitely feels like I'm hanging out with the person. So I totally get at that aspect. So vocally, if as long as you're vocally speaking to someone over a game on Tabletop Simulator, I mean that's half of being in the flesh and blood. Then all you need to do is have a webcam. I mean if you have a webcam feature in Tabletop Simulator, that'd be golden. And you know what else that could happen? And this is just a side thing, is have like one simple server in Legend Story Studios basement that just has all these different tables on Tabletop Simulator with passwords so local game stores could host events where people sign in and they don't have to worry about people like you and me modding the games and creating our own game servers and thing having low latency. I think that if there's a game server dedicated to it, could people still cheat and hack and do whatever you want, or quick of hand? Oh, they of course they can, man. But honestly, there really isn't much of an issue. I think in the long run, and in the online space with the tabletop simulator, it's just so there's so many positives to it, man. I mean, you can play any card you want. It really helps with that. I mean, you can play anyone online. You can easily do a bunch of things like shuffling your deck takes like 3 seconds and doing all this stuff. It's just it's a really good medium for playing the game. And I really think that I really think Legend Story Studios could not focus on it, not create a separate game of a digital game of Flesh and Blood, but I definitely think that they could do something on the side where literally they partner with TTS and they say, "Hey man, we like what you're doing and we'd like to modify stuff." And you know what TTS would say? They'd be like, "Oh, you're not suing us? Oh, thank God. Thank you. What do you want? We'll do anything you want." Like, I don't know how they haven't gotten sued so far with all their stuff they do. But anyway, I digress. But the point is, there's minor tweaks, and I'll reiterate them. I think definitely a maybe Discord could be integrated in there. Possibly, possibly not. I don't think that's a big deal, but I definitely think maybe a image of a webcam of the person, maybe that could be overlaid in TTS. That would be pretty cool. Also, I think you could have dedicated servers. So what would happen is literally you'd search for a server and Legend Story Studios would manage the game servers that the games are played on, so people couldn't mod or do some weird crap, and local game stores could easily run those events, or much more easily run those remotely, especially in our own environment. But I know this video is going on a bit, and one thing really bothered me in the beginning, and it still does, and it bothered me in a good way. It tickled my brain and made me think, and my my little like nodes in my brain are just firing off in a bunch of different directions because it really made me wonder. So I talk about this a lot on my channel. I've talked about this a ton, but in the beginning of Flesh and Blood, there are two articles. If you haven't read them, you gotta. It says, "Why aren't we making a digital game? Collectability." First article. Second article is, "Why aren't we making a digital game? Community." And both of them are extremely well written by James White. He goes into detail about how those are kind of like the key facets of Flesh and Blood. And it kind of always made me wonder, man, like why are they worded that way? Why didn't he just say we want to make a collectability game and a community-based game? And it's not really, I don't think that those were really the key factors in the about section, and made me wonder, man, in life sometimes I've noticed whenever you're saying this is something, right? Like, this is why aren't we aren't making a digital game? This is why we aren't making a digital game. It's like, well, why do you have the need to tell me that you're not making a digital game? Like, why does that even need to be said, man? Well, why isn't it just say, we love when games are collectible. We love when games have a great community. It's focused on a negative, not a negative, but like a like, well, we're going this way because we're not doing this, and because of this, and I can see that. Maybe there's a much simpler reason. Maybe the reason is because, if you're making a trading card game in 2019, 2020, you better sure as shit know like why you're not making it digital and you're making it cardboard or paper, because there's a lot of costs that have to go into producing a paper game versus digital, and we were trying to uh, sell that to investors. It might be a little bit hard, so you better. It's just like when you're interviewing in life, guys, and I'll go down a little rabbit hole. Is you want to always think, what is that person gonna do that's gonna poke me in the gut and that's really gonna stab me and get me in my weak areas? You need to know where your weakness areas are on your body. You need to put plate mail on that. If they think you have no experience, say, "Hey man, I don't have much experience, but I want to learn." Or you think about what weak areas they're going to hit, and you cover your ass there. So that could definitely be the reason why that those two articles were worded that way, because Legend Story Studios wanted to make them seem like, okay, hey, to investors, look, this is why we're not going to go the digital route, and this is why we are going to succeed because of it. These are our strengths, not our weaknesses. So there is definitely something there, but man, I don't know. It just always made me think. But going back, man, I just wanted to say that I've had just really great experiences online. Let's focus on the little positivity rants that Bronson has now. And I'm gonna tell you, man, like it's just so cool meeting people from just everywhere. And I mean, I've met Mitch from Midtown Merchant, he's up, 7 states up north from me, and then we got, Jason and Dane and Blake from Outcast Haven Crew all the way up there in Minnesota, and I would have never met any of these people, and would I have met them in the flesh and blood through flesh and blood? Maybe, possibly. Would have I gotten to hang out with them? That's a good question. I mean, think about it. There's no internet, and Bronson's in the flesh and blood somehow. I got introduced to it in some form of the word. And then that's a good question there. I don't even know if I would have gotten introduced to flesh and blood if it wasn't for the internet. But let's say I was, and I, for some reason, wanted to compete, which I don't normally do. Um, and let's say let's say on a whim, I was like, well, let's go to the national tournament for Flesh and Blood or the big thing, and that could be a possibility. So I go there and I meet these guys. I would probably be just playing against them, and I don't even know if I would have really interacted with them if I wasn't doing it on an online space. Because when I play someone in tournaments, it's very competitive, and then afterwards, I don't know if I would have interacted with them. Maybe it'd be like a good game and whatnot, but that would have been like a one-time deal where it's like I got to see them for a tournament for 3 days, and I don't know if a relationship really would have formed there, man. And I'm just saying that in all sense of the words. And when you think about the online realm, I do feel a sense of, yeah, man, like when you're not playing someone in person, it is something. It is not like a true sense of the word of really bonding and bringing people together. I feel that, but I think it does really transcend a lot better. So it's a real duality here. It's a duality. So flesh and blood, I think, gives you a better bond thing. You bond better with people, and you do form better communication relationships that way. But with the ones and zeros, man, you transcend. You transcend a lot further than just being in the flesh and blood. And with the use of technology with webcams and vocal chats and all that stuff, I just think it's a really great medium. I, I mean, I know trading card great games are a great medium to, form a bond, but I've I think the internet's a pretty damn good medium as well to communicate to people. And if you can use the internet and also trading card games, I mean, that's that's a pretty powerful white cloud type of thing to where you can you can communicate with people and form those relationships. So I know that this is more of a interesting discussion. I appreciate you listening this long and really giving me the time of day to rant on everything that's on my brain, because man, it's a really important discussion because it's a really big opportunity. It's a really big opportunity for the game to really grow and for people really to come together. And it might not be physical, it might not be coming together in person, but I just can't wait, man, till there are those big tournaments, those are those big events, and I'm able to meet people in the flesh and blood, and it'll be awesome to find, you know, one of those things, and all the people that I've met along the way of doing YouTube and playing flesh and blood games online and watching their contents and forum posts and all these things. Like I've developed all these bonds already. Now when I meet them in the flesh and blood, then then I'm already set to go, man. Like then it can, go further. But if I had not set all this stuff up and just met people through tournaments, I don't think I would have been able to meet as many people, man. It's just the internet's it's a powerful tool. But yeah, that's basically it for that. But essentially, I think to wrap it up, to summarize, and just to paint a picture first. I think currently Flesh and Blood is a sense where if you look at the world of Wraith, everybody's playing in the local game store, and if all the regions are the local game stores in their local communities, they're playing in the local communities. Dorinthia's playing with everyone in Solana, and Bravo's playing with everyone in Aria, and Katsu's playing with everyone in Mysteria and so on and so forth. But man, when you have the internet and the digital realm, that's when Bravo's playing Dorinthia, Dorinthia's playing Katsu, Katsu's playing Reinar, Azalea's playing, Viserai. People are getting connected on the interwebs and the world wide webs of the old thing, right? If you're looking at the map of Wrath, is right behind me. It's right there. Like, and if you look at the better looking one online, I feel that a good analogy to this is that in the current realm of Flesh and Blood, if it was played normally, it would just be literally like everyone's playing in their own region for a long ass time, and then once in a while they all come together in certain areas for world tournaments and such on, but it's a very rare occurrence. But now, literally everyone's playing everyone which way. Of course, is it still like people playing from their own countries mainly? Yes, but I can tell you, man, I've played a lot of different people from all over the world, and the digital space with tabletop simulator and those types of things do transcend barriers in a way that I think the Flesh and Blood type thing can't. And I think that even though Flesh and Blood, the trading card game, should remain a trading card game in the physical realm. I 100% believe in that. I'm not arguing that at all. I don't think Flesh and Blood should be produced with Legend Story Studios as some sort of online game where you have to pay for trading card games. That would really irritate me. But I definitely think that having some sort of digital type of game on the side, someone else is producing it, or it's an offshoot type thing that's sanctioned by Legend Story Studios, is definitely a great idea because it would help them with Legend Story Studios' main compass, not Flesh and Blood's, but Legend Story Studios' compass would be like bringing people together, and that is my my debate for all this. And I know I'm slamming my fist against the wall here with these ideas and personal opinions. And I know not a lot of this isn't original, man. I know a lot of people like the online realms with TTS and all that stuff. I just think that it is really imperative as companies to really put their foot in the sand and say, "Hey, this is what we stand for. We're not going to budge." And I could see how on the outside it does seem like Flesh and Blood could never give any credence to an online space because it really jacks their current business model up. But as long as the online space is not monetized in any way and money doesn't flow there, money will still flow to the local game stores. Local game stores will still be fine because there's collectors and investors and all, and kitchen table players who want to play the game too. So I don't think that TTS is gobbling up too much money. I think it's really forming bonds and it's getting people together to play a great game. It's a great medium for playing because you don't have to have the cards. I mean, it really eliminates a lot of barriers to entry into the game and to becoming a player into the game. And if you're interested in the game, you can literally spend $20, get TTS, play whatever deck you want, play with any cards you want from anywhere around the world. I've said it so many times, and it's just there's literally very little downside to that whole thing. So I think that even though it shouldn't be kind of the main focus, and world tournaments should definitely be held in the Flesh and Blood. I think worlds specifically need to be need to be in person and all that stuff. I totally feel that, but in the interim, between tournaments and all that stuff, um, digital realm stuff is a really good idea to focus because of what I've aforementionedly said. But yeah, this is a long discussion. Appreciate you guys listening to me on this one. It's a toughie. It's a real toughie because you want to stick to your guns, but on the other hand, you have to realize that the whole purpose is bringing people together. Because if playing great games is communication, and people are supposed to communicate, then when they do communicate, and they bring people together, how much people are you bringing together? That's the end goal of this whole sentences on the thing is bringing people together. But if you're only bringing people together locally, you're not bringing as many people together in my mind. I think you're forming a lot more spider webs and webs of connection if you're using the internet, the World Wide Web. So you're not bringing people together in the flesh and blood, but you're bringing people together in the ones and zeros.